Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for Monday, February 17th, 2025 at 6 p.m. I would note, Madam Clerk, all commissioners are present along with county manager and county attorney. Let's see Miss Margaret tonight. So she's taking off on us, huh? Okay. I would ask you to silence all your mobile devices. If you've got things that are going to make a noise, please take care of that right now. And as you come to the lectern tonight, please be sure that you press the button on the right so that the red light comes on. We can get a good recording and we can hear everybody speaking. Pleased tonight to have Reverend Dr. Wayne Johnson with us with Shiloh AME Church to bring our invocation. And Pastor, if you'll come forward, and that'll be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance led by our County Attorney, Mr. Destin Hall. Let's stand together.
O thou in whose presence my soul takes delight, in whom in affliction I call my comfort by day, my song in the night, my hope, my salvation, my all. Gracious and eternal Creator, we come into your presence. First of all, thanking you for a day that we've never seen in all the days of our lives, and we're confident that we'll never see it again. As we come into this place, we would ask for your grace and your mercy. We would ask that, Lord, you would govern and be the supreme ruler of all of the things that are coming before this august body. We would pray for the world in which we live, the United States of America, the state of North Carolina, and the county of Burke. We ask that you would be with us, and we ask that you would be the sovereign ruler of our lives. Let justice roll down like water and righteousness as a mighty stream. Be with us and continue to bless us and help us to remember, happy is that nation whose God is the Lord. And this we pray, and together we say, Amen.
Thank you, Pastor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, gentlemen, this brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, approval of agenda. Gentlemen, you've had that for review for several days. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Ma'am.
can we approve it as amended, removing the presentation from Animal Services? They're a little under the weather.
Yes, ma'am. We can do that. Gentlemen, as Madam Clerk noted, Caitlin was not able to be with us tonight, and we're going to remove item number 1. So if we can amend that approval showing that we have removed item 1 from the agenda, that would be great.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend my motion to approve the agenda with the removal of Pet of the Month, item number 1, presentations.
All right, thank you, sir. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0. All right, gentlemen, item 5, approval of meeting minutes. We have tonight meeting minutes, November 19th, 2024, Board of Commissioner regular meeting, December 2nd, 2024, Board of Commissioner organizational meeting, December 2nd, 2024, Board of Commissioner pre-agenda meeting, and December 16th, 2024, Board of Commissioner regular meeting. With there are no questions or changes, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as written and as you read.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. That'll be 5-0. All right, this brings us to item number Item number 1, presentation of financial data for the period ending December 31, 2024 from Western Piedmont Community College. That'll be presented tonight by Sandy Holman, and I haven't seen Sandy. Any word from Sandy? We don't know? Okay.
Not that I've seen thus far.
All right. Well, that's unusual. We'll just hold on Sandy's report. In case she shows up, we'll come back. Item number 2 comes from the county manager, presentation form of a fiscal year 23-24 audit. This will be presented by Alan Thompson, CPA from Thompson, Price, Scott, Adams and Company, PA. Mr. Thompson.
He is almost here. He was stuck in traffic in Charlotte, accident on 85. I just heard from him, so if we could maybe rearrange with item 3, or he will be here momentarily. He is en route.
Okay, that's fine. We will carry on. Item number 3, Western Piedmont Community, or rather Western Piedmont Council of Governments, and I know we can count on Anthony Starr to be here because I have already seen him. Mr. Starr, thank you for being here. We'll hear your report on interbasin transfer.
Mr. Turner?
Important matter that is affecting our region potentially, and that's interbasin transfers. So I'm glad to provide an overview of where we've been and where we are going with this issue for the board's benefit. So in the Catawba River Basin, we have 3 current IBTs, as we'll call them, interbasin transfers. Charlotte Water has a 33 million gallon per day interbasin transfer that was issued in 2002. Concord Kannapolis has a 20 million gallon per day IBT, of which 10 million comes from the Catawba River. That was issued in 2007. And then Mooresville, the town of Mooresville, has a pre-existing IBT before the current laws were set in place that is 9.54 million gallons maximum per day as well. So when I talk about basins, what are we talking about? Well, here's a map of North Carolina with its river basins, its major river basins. And you can see there the Catawba River. I would point out the Yadkin Pee Dee River, point out 2 basins that are involved in this particular discussion. I would note how much larger the Yadkin Pee Dee River Basin is to the Catawba River Basin. That'll, I think, have some context later on in the presentation. Under North Carolina law, the state designated those basins and provided a regulatory framework about when one locality transfers water from one of those basins to another. In addition to those major river basins, they also classified a number of sub-basins. You can imagine like a river, in our case, in the Catawba River Basin, you can see we're 3.1 and 3.2. 3.2 is the South Fork River that the headwaters begin in the South Mountains of Burke County and travels down through Catawba, Lincoln, and Gaston County before going back into the Catawba River. So it's part of the Catawba River Basin. It's just a different route for part of that basin. So in those sub-basins, though, the state's framework, they treat those sub-basins as if a completely different river basin. So they regulate them the same between those river sub-basins as they would transferring water from the Catawba River Basin to the Yadkin Basin. So there are currently 9 regulated IBTs in North Carolina. You can see there, only 3 of them have more than 30 million gallons per day. That would be the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority. They're at 30. You also have towns of Cary and Apex at 31, and Charlotte Water at 33 million gallons per day as well. And a number of those are sub-basin transfers, so several of those transfers wouldn't actually be there but for those regulations on the sub-basins. So what does it look like within that basin? You can see here a map showing just the number of different towns. We're up here in the upper area. There's Lake James, and there's Lake Roadhiss, Morganton right here, of course, in Burke County. And so we're at the headwaters of that, and it travels down all the way through Iredell County into Charlotte, into South Carolina through Rock Hill, Lancaster, and on down further into South Carolina. It becomes the Wateree River down in South Carolina. So within the Catawba River Basin, just a few quick facts about it. You know, it's the first kind of planned river basin for electricity production in the United States. Over 100 years ago, the first dam being built in 1904. Lake James, I think, was built between the teens and 20s as well. And so it's had modest water flow because it's not a very large river basin in terms of the amount of surface area that it catches from the rainfall and the surface water, underground surface water, underground beneath the surface water. So that's about 3,700 million gallons per day. And you can see there, we've got about 252 billion gallons worth of storage in our lakes along the Catawba River Basin, which is only about 7% of our annual rainfall. Just another map here that shows that it is the most dense, it is the most densely populated river basin in North Carolina, and this map shows that. So you can see here, a lot of that is due in the Charlotte area, the red and orange being the more dense areas, but it's a product of the high population that's served by this basin, but also the small area, relatively speaking, of the river basin. So Charlotte Water, formerly named Charlotte-Mecklenburg Utilities, CMUD, has a 30 million gallons per day IBT certificate. The transfer is based on water withdrawals from Lake Norman and Mountain Island Lake into Catawba River Basin. And what I mean by transfer, it's the net transfer. So they pull water out of the Catawba River, they treat it at the water plant, it's then moved through its system and then discharged, that portion, into another river basin, either like through a wastewater treatment plant on the other side of the river basin in the Yadkin area. So it does not count water that is returned back to the Catawba River if it's pumped back into a discharge, into a wastewater treatment plant that goes back into the Catawba River. So it's only the net amount of water that's transferred out. So it had a number of conditions when they got that certificate. They're in your packet. I won't go through all those for time's sake. You know, it has, you know, those were a few things. When you say source basin, that means the basin that is providing the water, in this case, the Catawba River. When you say receiving basin, that's what it sounds like, the water that's the basin that's receiving the water, in this case, the Yadkin Rocky River sub-basin. Charlotte Water is requesting a modification of its IBT of currently 33 million gallons. And they are still, at this point, determining the exact number that they would request, but it would be for the next 30 years. And presentations, though, to the Department of Environmental Quality and the Catawba Wateree River Management Group indicate that it could be an additional 30 or 33 million gallons. So what does that look like in their jurisdiction? So this is a map of Mecklenburg County, and this map, you know, you see the Catawba River and the lakes here. They've got the red dots are where they bring water in and where they treat it here at these three blue squares. And then everything on this side is in the Catawba River on the west side or the left side of the map. On this, everything on the right or the east of this purple line, you can see the eastern third of Mecklenburg County is in the Rocky River Basin, which is part of the Yadkin River Basin. So also an important history and context of this IBT is the Concord-Kannapolis IBT. They applied for a IBT certificate with the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, which is the state-created commission that's responsible for deciding whether or not to issue these IBTs. They go through and make the decision under the current state law. So they applied in 2005 to transfer. They had originally asked for a 48 million gallon per day transfer, with 38 million gallons of that coming from the Catawba River. There was numerous protests and public opposition to that, a lot of public meetings. The EMC decided to, in January 2007, to only allow 10 million gallons per day from the Catawba River. In that agreement, they had a number of conditions. That agreement between the stakeholders of our area plus some other parties and Concord and Kannapolis. We spelled out a number of conditions that included them implementing drought measures because at that time we were going through a severe drought. In fact, some of our water systems were very close in 2007 of not being able to produce adequate amount of water because the water levels were too low for their intakes on the Catawba River. So also, Mooresville has a IBT that was grandfathered in, if you will. It was prior to the current laws. They have 9.554 million gallons per day, and they transfer their water out of the basin into the Rocky River Basin. I will point out that Mooresville has been very proactive and frankly has provided more information than Charlotte has on their request up front, and their communication has been good. There's a couple of distinctions to be made between Mooresville and Charlotte in that respect. They've already produced documents showing what the three alternatives are that they're considering. The first one being an expansion of the IBT up to 12.6 million gallons, which is a little over 3 million gallons increase. They also, a second option would be to take and expand their wastewater treatment plant. And basically their situation comes from they need to expand the wastewater treatment plant, but that plant discharges into the Rocky River Basin. So the more that they increase that plant's capacity, the more IBT that creates, right? So the second option would be to instead pump some or all of that water back to the Catawba River after it's treated from that wastewater treatment plant near the Rocky River. And then a third option would be is they contract with a neighboring utility, i.e. Charlotte Water, to send some of the wastewater down to them. That would then also be discharged back into the Catawba River. We don't have cost estimates for these options yet. And their situation is a little bit different. It's a much smaller area, obviously. We're talking about a much smaller amount of water. And you look at their town, it's divided up into 3 river basins. They're right on the top of those 3 different river basins, if you will, the South Yadkin River and the Rocky River, both which flow to the Yadkin River, and then in the blue, the Catawba River Basin. So there are distinctions. We're not supporting that IBT increase. We're not yet opposing it either. We're just assessing the information with that particular request that came in just the last few months. So back in 2007, flashing back to that, there was a lot of back and forth about all that, and the state law was changed as a result of our concerns that were expressed and a number of other stakeholders. And it has a number of conditions there. You can't resell the water from an IBT. It has a more defined process as well. Also requires more public input, and they also have to complete an environmental documents that have to be approved. And so it has a number of things. They can impose mitigation strategies on the certificates when they apply under the new law as well. The old process here on the left, much more simpler and not well defined. The process on the right has some additional steps, although I think there's probably room where it could be improved for sure. And all this comes down to is protecting our water intakes. You think we have 6 treatment plants in our region that provide water in our 4-county area. And you think about a lake here, if you will, and this is the normal full pond level. You can see the normal target elevation, and this, how they calculate that storage that's available is based on the most shallow water intake. And so during drought conditions like we had in 2007, that water level got really close to those water intake levels. And so once those intakes get exposed to the air or really close to the surface, they start cavitating. You can't produce water anymore. A few stats here about the lake. So about, as I mentioned before, 3,700 million gallons per day coming through the Catawba River, but that's not through our area. That is on downstream near the South Carolina line. We have about 255 billion gallons of storage, but we lose 204 million gallons through evaporation. We also then pull out 110 million gallons on net for our drinking water. Then we have about 1 million gallons for industrial, not a big. Power generation pulls out about 57 million gallons. You think about some of the power plants along the Catawba River. And then also agriculture pulls out another 37 million gallons. That's about a 400 million gallon decrease there from where it inflows all the way down to the Wateree hydro station. So that map, you know, of the basin, this is just another one that if you kind of really want to dig into the details in your packet, but this shows kind of what the flow points are at each of our dams that we created. You can see here at Lake James, about 258 million gallons go through the waterway there at Lake James. About 471 million gallons go through and over Lake Roadhiss's dam, and then another 147 million gallons through the Oxford Dam that holds Lake Hickory, as a few examples. Lake Norman, another 323. But see, they get added up right along the way, and so that's why you get that 3,700 million gallons per number down at the end. So the EMC is required to consider a number of different factors when it's looking at this. You know, its reasonableness, alternatives, the detrimental effects that it has, the purposes of its use. It can only grant that certificate if the benefits outweigh the detriments. Has to be mitigated to a reasonable degree, and it can either approve it, modify it, or deny it outright when someone like Charlotte Water applies for an IBT. Where we're at in the process are the two items in red. Notice of intent's been filed by Charlotte Water back in February. They've started immediately having public input meetings. That's the one that we had one in Hickory, the facility that wasn't big enough, and then another one here in Morganton later in the fall to get public input. The next stages are described in this list. The public comments will be submitted to the state and reviewed and incorporated into the final EIS, which is Environmental Impact Statement. Then they anticipate submitting that EIS or Environmental Impact Statement in 2026. That's when the EMC could start its process and deciding whether or not it will approve it by having its required hearing at that point. And then there'll be more comments, and that's when we'll have to decide what conditions we might ask, what other information we would present in opposition to that. So so in response to all this, a coalition was formed, like was done some 15 years ago when the Concord Kannapolis IBT came up. And nearly all of our local governments in our region have adopted resolutions opposing the Charlotte IBT. Of course, this board did last year as well. The EMC will hold a public hearing, as I mentioned, sometime in 26. And we're at the request of the local governments in our 4 counties plus McDowell County. We are providing coordination of the region's discussions and the response to the Charlotte IBT request. And like I said, it includes all 5 of those counties. So we've adopted a preliminary budget. Burke County's helped contribute to that funding. That includes hiring an attorney that specializes in this. Her name is Ruth Levy, and she's with a firm that has got a lot of capacity. And they have offices in Raleigh and Columbia, extensive experience in this area. And they'll be providing engineering consultant expertise as well during the process. And then we've also hired an advocacy firm, EQV Strategic, to help us represent our interests with state leaders on this matter as well. And we're also participating in a work group that's organized by the City of Charlotte to engage some of the stakeholders involved in the process, and it's a pretty large group. So I would say this about this matter with IBT. You know, we are not opposed to Charlotte growing. We just don't want that growth to occur at the expense of our region. And the limited resources of the Catawba River shouldn't be used to subsidize growth outside of the river basin. And just to put the size of this transfer in place, the amount of water that they're proposing to transfer is more than our region produces and uses by all 6 of its water treatment plants combined. So and that's, we don't, we're not transferring that water. That's just what they plan to transfer. So this could negatively impact us in two ways, as I see. One is, under drought conditions, it impacts the flow of water necessary that has to be sent downstream, and Duke Energy is responsible for managing the river, and they do a good job with that. But it would force them to make sure flows are going down the river in a way that would negatively impact us potentially in severe drought conditions like we had just a number of years ago. And the other way that we're concerned that this might impact us is our growth. So if Charlotte continues to transfer more water out of the Catawba River Basin, and then other entities do the same thing as well, at what point will some state or federal agency in the future say, enough transferring of water out of this river basin, it's impacting the environment too much, or some other factor, and they impose regulations on our growth by limiting how much water we can withdraw from the Catawba River? And so, again, we want Charlotte, we're okay with Charlotte growing, we're not against Charlotte growing, we just don't want it to occur at our expense. And so Charlotte should implement policies and infrastructure improvements to mitigate and potentially eliminate and avoid IVTs. And this, like I said, the droughts and our future economic growth are where we see the impacts that are greatest for this situation. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Gentlemen, any questions for Anthony on his report?
Mr. Speaker? Yes, Anthony, I'd be concerned, how do we collectively do it as a state for all the counties concerned with our neighbors there in Charlotte and on below, but we can take care of ourselves first? Everybody should see us as the mother hen, so to speak. This is where it's starting at. So how can they collectively with us work together so that we've got everything in place to make sure that the source is taken care of? We want growth everywhere, and it's coming. And we know it's going to come in western North Carolina, and we really want to make sure our resources are in order. So how do we do that collectively?
Well, I think we're working on a number of strategies, and I think that's the question on this issue. And I think the answer is that Charlotte can change the way it manages its utility system and builds its infrastructure to avoid these large IBTs. That's the answer, right? They can pump the water back to the Catawba River or develop other infrastructure from a different source in the Rocky River or Yadkin River Basin to avoid this. And that's how we protect the water in the Catawba River Basin.
Well, would the state, is that something the state would help work on?
Yes, and yes, definitely the state, and we're engaging with leadership on that. On advice of our attorney, we shouldn't discuss our strategies in public at this point. We don't want to convey all of our thoughts to the city of Charlotte, frankly.
Absolutely, I'll be quiet.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Anthony, when's the last time that the city of Charlotte requested a interbasin transfer? Do you know?
The city of Charlotte?
Or the Mecklenburg, that area?
So their last certificate was issued in 2002.
2002.
Yes.
So
That's
in
the
my
current
mind, they've
certificate
had
of 33 million gallons per day.
20 years.
So in my mind, they've had 22 years to plan for this growth. I don't quite see that a failure to plan on their part would constitute an emergency on ours, and I would be very much in favor of not allowing that to be granted.
Agree.
Other questions, comments?
Mr. Starr, you may have mentioned this in your presentation, but is Charlotte also requesting a transfer from the Yadkin PD Basin or just Catawba?
It's a one-way transfer, so they'll be transferring the Catawba River into the Rocky River, Yadkin River Basin. It would not be transferring water from the Yadkin River Basin back to Catawba. If they were, that would be netted out in the calculations.
Other questions, comments? All right, Anthony, thank you for this report. And
Thank you.
gentlemen, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report as presented.
I'll make a motion. The report be accepted as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. That'd be 5-0. Item number 4 comes also from the Council of Governments, Transportation Update, presented by Avery Ritchie. Good evening, Avery.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for having me tonight. I will just be giving a somewhat brief update on transportation in Burke County, whether it's planned, funded, or proposed projects across all modes. I'm Avery Ritchie. I am with the Western Piedmont Council of Governments and the Greater Hickory MPO, which is housed in the Council of Governments. So first, again, I'm with what's called a Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we are housed in the Western Piedmont Council of Governments. So the MPO, it still covers the same 4-county region as the Western Piedmont Council of Governments. And if you see on the map here, the pinkish purplish area, that's the urbanized areas, but we cover all 28 local governments within the 4-county region. We meet monthly with 2 transportation boards. One's the more technical board, and it's comprised of municipal staff, local government staff, also DOT, MPO staff as well. We also have what's called the TAC, which is elected and appointed officials, as well as transit representatives, Board of Transportation representatives. And again, we meet monthly and we discuss all transportation within the 4-county region. So the MPO, it focuses on transportation planning. So we look at strategies for operating, managing, and financing to a degree, financing more or less, meaning we try to project out how much funding we think that we will be allocated within like 10-year windows of time. And we try to ensure that the area's long-term goals and initiatives are met. So this is through constant meetings with our local government staff, with DOT, with public input, just constant meetings. So transportation planning, at least federally, it revolves around what's called the 3C process. So we try to make sure it's a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive process, and it really looks at those 6 factors that you see: public involvement, planning factors, whether that be land use or transportation planning factors, management system input. So this kind of looks at travel demand models, demographic data, volume to capacity maps, major investment studies, air quality conformity process. So that has more to do if you're having any environmental or air quality concerns within your region, such as ozone or PM 2.5. Financially, or a financial plan. So one set of our long-range transportation plans, it does have to be fiscally constrained, but we kind of call that monopoly money. It doesn't necessarily mean that all projects are funded, but it does have to be fiscally constrained within the 10-year horizon windows. So as for what specifically is an MPO, it is a policymaking group that's comprised of representatives from local governments and transportation authorities. And you're required to have, federally, you're required to have an MPO if your area has a population of 50,000 or more. And for us, we actually are what's called a transportation management area, because since we encompass the 4-county region, our population is over 200,000. Which actually qualifies us for some additional funding sources that we call our discretionary funding, which I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. But it also, unfortunately, does kind of sign us up for additional things that we have to do federally and on a state level to maintain that TMA status. So as far as who we work with on a very consistent basis, DOT, which there are many different divisions of DOT. For us, we fall in funding divisions 11, 12, and 13. We also work closely with what's called the Transportation Planning Division, the Integrated Mobility Division, which is more kind of on the public transit side of things, Federal Highway Administration, and then FTA, or Federal Transit Authority itself. We also work closely with Greenway Public Transportation. And then, as I mentioned before, all local governments within Alexander-Burke, Caldwell, and Catawba counties. So, again, I mentioned we have 2 boards that meet monthly. The Transportation Advisory Committee, that's going to be your local elected and appointed officials. It's also going to be, again, the transit agency, representatives of major modes of transportation, Board of Transportation, state officials. This board is supported by MPO staff and that technical committee that also meets monthly, and as well as a couple of other subcommittees that we have. We have a safety subcommittee and a bike and pedestrian committee. So specifically, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the one that's made up of elected officials, they really get the final vote in the final vote for our 4-county region and establishing regional policy and forum for decision making. They help us develop regional visions and goals and establish a list of priorities, whether it's through long-range plans or applications submitted through DOT system that we submit every 2 years. We do really count on those officials to know what their communities want and what their communities need. And, you know, like I said, ensure that the decisions reflect the concerns of their residents. We do not submit and advocate for projects that aren't wanted by the community that it serves. So, you know, we want to make sure we have that information from our TCC and our TAC officials. So, TCC members, we always ask that they closely coordinate with the TAC members. So, it's again, municipal staff, and we coordinate with them on desired projects, applications, needs, even alignments of potential road projects, and DOT coordination. So we also we communicate project priorities and concerns with those municipal staff, and we just try to ensure your local government is properly represented at both TCC and TAC. So, planning products that are required by law. First, we have what's called a Unified Planning Work Program. This is just the budget that covers the entire fiscal year for the MPO itself. It covers all planning-related projects. You know, if we utilize any consultants, it would cover that. We also have what's called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This plan is one of those long-range transportation plans I was telling you about. It covers a 25 to 30-year time period. It's updated every 5 years. We have the Transportation Improvement Program, which is basically the same thing as the State Transportation Improvement Program. It's a 10-year budget that DOT, you know, puts together, but only the first 5 years of the STIP are funded projects. The latter 5 years, they unfortunately have to reprioritize and compete for funding. We also have what's called performance measures. So this is data that we monitor on an ongoing basis, and we kind of revisit these performance measures annually. It looks at safety targets, it looks at pavement conditions, several other things. We look at some performance measures that are also dealing with transit. DOT currently sets performance measures for most MPOs in the state. So currently we follow DOT's performance measures. There is potential that we could, you know, adopt our own performance measures, but there's a whole host of other things that go into that in terms of making sure you collect the proper data and metrics and everything. We're required to have a public involvement plan that just outlines public comment periods, public hearings, anything involving the public. So we don't really have to do anything for transportation conformity analysis. That's more for air quality issues. We do have a congestion management process, and this identifies bottlenecks within the region. And we look at those different bottlenecks and congested areas with our DOT division engineers to come up with potential solutions to the problems or potential funding sources. We do have also Title VI and limited English proficiency inclusion plans, and that just identifies how we need to conduct outreach and how we need to translate materials. So real quick, I had mentioned all of these long-range transportation plans. What we are really pushing local governments to do currently is get any bicycle, pedestrian, and even transit facilities that you would like to see funded in adopted plans. Because what happens is, per the DOT's Complete Streets policy, if you have a project that is funded through, DOT during that prioritization phase, during the applications that we submit to them, as long as you catch them before environmental review happens on that funded project, then if DOT finds that the bicycle, pedestrian, or transit facilities are feasible, they will pay 100% of the construction of those facilities. But you do have to agree to maintain, you have to sign a municipal agreement to maintain the facilities once they're constructed. So again, we encourage you, if there's any, especially in a recommended road project, any that you see on this slide tonight that you would like to see bicycle and pedestrian facilities, just reach out to us. We'd be happy to hear that. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. We've already kind of covered most of it, but regional transportation planning, we look at long-range transportation plans, the Transportation Improvement Program, that's the budget that we coordinate with DOT on. Project prioritization, every 2 years we submit new applications for, all modes of transportation to DOT. Public involvement is ongoing. Coordination and collaboration, whether it's between MPOs, local governments, DOT, it's ongoing. Compliance and reporting, we submit federal and state reports quarterly, and annually as well. We collect demographic data, travel demand data, funding allocation. We have to review all of the different funding sources each year just in coordination with DOT to try and make sure everything's fiscally constrained. Again, travel demand modeling, strategic planning, and then policy development that we try to guide through TCC and TAC. So, just to look a little more in depth at how these transportation plans fit into the grand scheme of things. If you look at this chart and kind of picture it like a funnel. So the comprehensive transportation plan, this covers, more than 30 years. It's more or less a vision. So it's not fiscally constrained. So you don't have to identify different horizon years and apply different dollar amounts to projects for that one. Now you trickle down into the actual metropolitan transportation plan that I mentioned earlier. It covers a 25 to 30 year window. It's updated every 5 years. You have to identify 10-year horizon windows. So for this one, it's 2030, 2040, 2050. And you have to apply inflation factors to each of those 10 years to kind of guesstimate how much money, you expect to have in that 10-year time frame, how many projects you should program within that 10-year time frame just for project recommendations. It is fiscally constrained, but like I said, in the sense of we kind of consider it monopoly money. Those projects, the vast majority of them aren't funded. Their project recommendations. So the overall goal of these two plans is to get your project into what's called the prioritization process. So the prioritization process, that's the application process through DOT. We submit applications again for all modes every 2 years. And this is the gateway into potentially getting your project funded. Although I will admit the last couple rounds of prioritization have not been great funding-wise. So ideally, you know, if your project scores very well, you have a good chance of getting funded in that first 5-year window of the State Transportation Improvement Program. So the first 5 years of the STIP. So that's what all these long-range transportation plans get at, or, you know, we're trying to get projects funded in the first 5 years of the STIP. So a little bit of background on the prioritization process. It's separated into 3 tiers. You have statewide mobility, which that's going to be interstates, and for us, certain segments of US 321. There's unfortunately no local input at this level. It's 100% data-driven. So your project does have the potential, so say you have an interstate project that doesn't score particularly well, the statewide tier, it could trickle down to the regional impact tier, but it's less funding at the regional impact tier. So these are going to be your US and NC routes. You do get 30% local input at this tier, but some of that local input is shared with our division partners. We are in funding regions F and G, which apparently are some of the more competitive regions within the state. So, you know, trickle down and you get to the division needs tier. That's going to be like your secondary routes. You do get 50% of local input at that tier, but again, that local input is also split with our division engineers. We are in divisions 11, 12, and 13 and funding regions F and G. So it gets a little bit confusing, especially when you're trying to figure out, you know, who has what money available. These were all of the projects that we either evaluated or submitted for this last round of prioritization. We evaluated 23, and again, this is just within Burke County. We evaluated 23, and we actually wound up submitting 21 projects, and we met with all local governments and DOT staff. And unfortunately, none were funded for our entire 4-county region, but really that's how it was for the whole state. I mean, I think there was maybe less than a handful of projects that got funded in the entire state. So unfortunately, that wasn't really a surprise. So we also submitted projects for bike and pedestrian. We evaluated 5 and submitted 5. None of those projects were funded either. But, so now we'll get into what's actually funded, at least currently, in the STIP. This is the approved 2024 to 2033. Again, it covers that, you know, around 10-year time frame. And I will say, so when I first released my slides, the draft STIP hadn't come out. So some of the right-of-way and construction dates have shifted on some of these projects, and I will let you know. But so first we have, you know, basically the ones that competed in that prioritization process. That's going to be Exit 118 and NC 181. Also, the Malcolm Boulevard, Conley Springs Road. Right now, only the Conley Springs Road portion is funded, but also the bridge is within Burke County, Castle Bridge. So on that one, well, I'll go through. So I-40, Exit 118, the right-of-way and construction dates have stayed the same currently. That's in the draft STIP. NC 181, they did shift construction to 2030. It had been 2029. So that's in the draft STIP. Again, it's not adopted. And the Malcolm Boulevard, Conley Springs Road, just the Castle Bridge portion of the project was delayed 1 year. So construction is now 2026 for just the bridge. And then US 321A, or I'm sorry, US 321, so U4700A, from US 70 to 321A. That project, construction was delayed by 1 year to 2027. This map, oh, sorry, it's hard to see. It does not show all of the funded projects that are in Burke County. It just shows the ones that we received through prioritization. So currently you have NC 181, you have Exit 118, and then you have just a tiny portion of US 321 falling within Burke County over there. I don't think they like anybody lately. So this is the current step. It's going to, and I'll just warn you, it's going to change significantly once the draft step is approved. So this is just the current step, and the draft step is set to be adopted by the Board of Transportation in July, I believe. The red projects you see, those are currently not funded, but those are good scoring projects. Unfortunately, a lot of the interstate projects you see along I-40, a lot of those red projects used to be funded, and because of different funding crises with DOT, they became unfunded. Unfortunately, so like I said, you can expect a lot of changes with this map because at least in the draft step, which again is subject to change, it looks like, and I know this is outside of your region, but still relevant, it looks like NC 150 is unfunded. So it's probably not going to happen, at least for the foreseeable future. Startown Road is unfunded now. 33rd and 34th, the intersection on 33rd and 34th Street in Longview, a lot of tractor trailers get stuck across the railroad tracks on that one. It's currently unfunded as well. So those are some key differences that you'll see from this map to when the actual draft step gets adopted. We're going through different scenarios with DOT to see if there's any way to maybe preserve segments of some of those projects. We've also seen some pretty significant right-of-way and construction delays as well within the draft step. But, you know, DOT basically says it's all subject to change until July. So we have several standalone, and when I say standalone, it just means a bicycle or a pedestrian project that's not attached to a highway improvement. We have several standalone bike ped projects within the current step. And I'm proud to say that all 4 of these actually came from our discretionary funding source, so our locally administered projects program. So we get those extra funds since we are a TMA, and a lot of times we use those funds towards bike, pedestrian, sometimes transit, or even small intersection projects. So we do have these 4 funded projects within the STIP. And here's just a quick map of those projects. Some of them are hard to see, but you can see the STIP ID. So the one in Hildebrand, the one further out in Burke County on 126, and then I believe 2 in Morganton. This is just, this is the current bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure system. So I say that because we're currently working on a regional bike and pedestrian plan. We're trying to identify any gaps in the network, any safety issues. We're trying to pair that with a regional safety plan to hopefully increase our chances of different funding sources. So again, locally administered project program. This is funded using our discretionary funding sources that we get because we're over 200,000 in population. So it's really how almost all bike and pedestrian projects are funded within our 4-county region. But yeah, you submit your projects, it goes through a methodology, and it's more or less up to TCC and TAC's discretion as to, you know, who they feel is I mean, most of the projects wind up getting funded, but of course it does run through TCC and TAC. We have an annual call for projects in March. We also have a supplemental funding call in November. We generally receive around $3.5 million annually. So, you know, if you're interested in bike and pedestrian projects, we also offer services in lap administration services, because sometimes administering a project with all the different federal hoops can be a little bit of a challenge. So, we have a position currently at the MPO where he deals with actually administering these projects, informing local governments of the best decisions for those projects. So that brings us to Burke County Public Transit. You have 2 flex routes, and flex just means it can deviate up to 3/4 of a mile off the route upon request. And also, you see like the larger polygon shaped thing that encompasses those 2 flex routes. That is the microtransit service area. So microtransit has been around for a couple of years now, but Greenway is still working on trying to set up an application so that you wouldn't have to call the dispatch every single time. And also, microtransit just means it's same-day service, curb-to-curb service. Some people kind of loosely compare it to Uber or Lyft, So currently you call dispatch, and if they have the available rides and vehicles, then, you can be picked up same day. Currently, the hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we also have we submitted projects for both aviation and rail. Right now, we only have one committed rail project, and that is a safety project involving a crossing in Morganton. Okay, so back to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Our Metropolitan Transportation Plan currently covers through year 2050. So we have 17 chapters, and again, this covers Horizon Year 2030, 2040, and 2050. I'm not going to go through every single one of these projects because there's a ton. But if there's any projects that you see on these slides that interest you, let me know. I will say, as far as the 2030 Horizon Year projects go, a lot of these are funded projects. So, they fall within that first 5-year window of the STIP. There are 6 projects in the 2030 Horizon Year. 5 of them are funded. And again, this is just for Burke County. It does not cover the 4-county region. One project, so the one unfunded project you see is the Burkemont-Fleming intersection there at the bottom. Unfortunately, that used to be a funded project, and there are safety concerns there. So we've had walk audits with a DOT. So walk audit, you go out with DOT or, whatever stakeholders you want, and you identify mobility barriers or, especially from a pedestrian or a cyclist or a transit user's standpoint. So we've had walk audits out there. DOT is aware, that improvements need to be made there, as well as the crosswalk a little further down West Fleming at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. We also had a walk audit out there. We've been in communication with DOT. I know they made some improvements, but unfortunately that did not, unfortunately that did not seem to solve it. But there's communication about that and further down Fleming. The 2040 projects, there are 9 projects in this Horizon Year. Currently, all of them are unfunded, so they're just project recommendations, even though they are within the fiscally constrained portion of the plan. Most of these are interstate and exit projects. Actually, the vast majority of these were submitted in prioritization and identified both in our safety and congestion management plans. So our 2050 MTP projects, there are, or year 2050 MTP projects, there are 10 project recommendations. Currently, all are unfunded at this moment. Several of these were also submitted in prioritization as well. So it's probably easier just to look at a map of all of the different projects. So the green is Horizon Year 2030. The purple is Horizon Year 2040, and the orange is Horizon Year 2050. all of the grade projects, those are beyond 2050. So in the comprehensive transportation plan. So just a quick background on what's happening with US 321, even though I know only a tiny portion is within Burke County. So one thing that needs to change on this slide, since the draft STIP has changed, right now they're scheduling to take bids in not of summer of 2026, but of 2027 instead. So they're nearing the completion of right-of-way acquisition, and they're planning to start utility relocation. This is what's called, well, some people call it a super street, some people call it a RCI corridor, or reduced conflict intersection corridor. So basically, you try to, create as much flow as possible without red lights stopping you, but you have the different U-turn bulbs for anyone needing to turn the opposite direction. Those U-turn bulbs are signalized, so if the U-turn bulbs start backing up, then it will trigger, a signal at that U-turn bulb. Let's see, we have NC 181, the funded portion, that's from St. Mary's Church Road to Morganton ETJ. Again, so the let date is now scheduled for 2030, so it backed up a year. This involves widening and I believe bike lanes. There might be additional bike and pedestrian facilities. I'm not sure at this point. That's what's currently planned. So exit 118, as I'm sure you're all aware, thankfully the right-of-way and construction date stayed the same on this one in the draft SIP. But this is the interchange improvements. There's a couple of different alternatives right now. I think they're going with alternative 2. That's subject to change, but that's what the 2 roundabouts and one incorporating, Curly's Fish Camp Road, and also both alternatives replace the old NC-10 bridge. So, and they're talking about bike ped facilities on like NC-10 and the connections up into the roundabouts. So we also have, so the Western North Carolina Passenger Rail. So this is the Salisbury to Asheville Passenger Rail Corridor. It was awarded a $500,000 corridor identification grant. So this basically funded a feasibility study, and we're trying to enter step 2 of the CID, which is known as the Service Development Plan. There's a lot of local support behind this, and despite Helene, Norfolk Southern is, they're working on stabilizing everything, and the DOT Rail Division has informed us that now is probably, the best time to do that service development plan, to coordinate with Norfolk Southern and just get all of the different improvements needed in writing and good cost estimates for those. So our boards, have approved our portion. So the 10% matches covers all local or all municipalities from Salisbury to Asheville. But, our boards have covered our portion of that 10% local match. And we're still meeting continuously with all jurisdictions along that route. So the routes you see there in green, those were the corridor identification awards. So all of those are, trying to get that service development plan in place. So as far as opportunities go, there's opportunities for, transportation. There's always Greenway public transportation. There's share the ride services, passenger rail, bike and pedestrian amenities, certain grants, although some of the federal ones, we're not really sure how some of those are going to shake out. And then last but not least, the land use planning opportunities. So we always encourage you on the land use planning side of things to consider sidewalks and multi-use paths and adopted plans. Things like driveway cuts, trying to consolidate driveway cuts. Also looking at parking, setbacks, lighting, several elements there that you see, freight access when you're considering, roadway improvements and plans. All right, I know that's a lot. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you, Avery. Any questions for Avery on this transportation plan? All right, seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion to accept this report as presented.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Burns, all those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk. Brings us to item 5 from the Health Department, Local Health Director receiving a Dogwood Award. This will be presented by Ashley Jarrett tonight. Good evening, Ashley.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I am not here to give you a report. I'm here to actually celebrate. And today we're going to celebrate our health director, Danny Scalise, for his tremendous contributions to Western North Carolina over the 3 years that he's been with us. The Dogwood Award is and was created by former General Attorney Josh Stein back in 2017, and it's given to citizens and leaders all across North Carolina who show dedication and leadership to serving and promoting the health and well-being and safety of their citizens that they work for. So Danny received this at the end of last year in December, and we're here to celebrate it. If you know Danny, you know that he is one who loves to educate and loves to put the community forward, and especially the health and well-being of its citizens. So Burke County is really, really special and has him, and we wanted to celebrate that. His work with our substance use and educating the community on what this topic is was a huge driving force for this award. And I hope you guys will join me in celebrating him for his work.
Thank you, Ashley. Danny, stand up, come forward. Yep. All right. We do congratulate Danny and his award from Dogwood here. And any word you'd like to say about the award, Danny?
No, it was quite a surprise. Governor, then Attorney General, contacted me to tell me I was going to receive this. It was, I still don't know exactly like who submitted my name for it or how it was done. I just got a call and said, hey, you need to be here. I was the last person he gave it to before he left the Attorney General's office, so that made it a little more special. I've appreciated getting to know him through some of our talk with substance use disorder, and if you all remember, he came here to Burke County for one of our community forums last year. So it was a big deal to me. I appreciate it, especially, you know, I grew up in West Virginia. I've only been here for about 4 years, so it was nice to receive that.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to back up now to item number 2, presentations of our fiscal year 23-24 audit. This will be presented by Alan Thompson, CPA, with Thompson Price Scott Adams. Evening, Alan.
Hey, sir, how you doing?
Very good. Thank you for being here. Sorry you got hung up in traffic.
I apologize for that.
You know, you sort of got hung up in traffic in 2 ways. Transportation, you know, got ahead of you right here.
So I know you had a copy of the audit report earlier, and I'm going to see if I can manage that thing right there. So the main thing you hire us as an independent audit firm to do is issue an opinion on the financial statements as a whole. We issue an unmodified report, which is a quote-unquote clean report. And in page 1 of your presentation summary there, under qualitative aspects of accounting practices, on those 3 paragraphs, there's a phrase in each one, appropriate accounting policies, accounting estimates, and disclosures in the financial statements being neutral, consistent, and clear, and we were fine with all 3 of those. On the bottom, it talks about difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We had no difficulties in performing our audit. On the top of page 2, there were no uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements with management. Management did provide us with a representation letter dated December 5th. We're unaware that management consulted the outside accountants, auditors, etc. And then under other findings or issues, When we did our walkthroughs, we noted some secondary review processes that were lacking in the planning and inspections and environmental health department. We discussed that with the departments when we were on site. We also had an audit committee meeting where we reviewed all this in significant detail. Appreciate the chairman being a participant in that committee. And we also got positive responses for any of the findings that we had in terms of correcting those and getting those on target. In testing overtime for proper approvals, we noted 2 of the sampled employees didn't have proper sign-offs. Additionally, the EMS department supervisors had no secondary approvals on their timesheets. All that's been corrected since then. And then lastly, in reviewing transfers, we recommend that a secondary authorizer should be required for sending out manually entered ACH transactions. We've seen that have a major issue in another entity that we audit, and so that's the reason for that recommendation. On page 3, probably the big thing to take away from this, that your finance staff will probably work like crazy. In that last paragraph, before you get to restriction on use, there's a new standard coming out which will have an impact on the government-wide standards called 101, which means that all your compensated absences are going to have to be accrued on your financial statements, which will significantly increase the liability side of your balance sheet. It's not that they're not already there, it's just they're going to force you to put them on the balance sheet. And then to take a look at the numbers, what we attempt to do here is put the current year numbers. I'm not saying these are all the key numbers in the audit report, but these are definitely some of those numbers in this first column, and then put the 4 prior year audit report numbers beside that, so you have a feel for what the number is not just standing there in space. You get a feel for what it really means. So you see total fund balance there in your general fund at $41,036,000. If you would go back to 2020, you see that same numbers, $26,775,000. Unavailable fund balance at $11.2 million. The other restricted committed at $2.9. And then general fund expenditures at $118.2 million. And fund balance available as a percentage at 25.18%. And unassigned fund balance as a percentage at 22.72%. Then you see in that next section there, revenues over and under expenses before transfers and contributions. General fund at $6.4 million, other governmental funds at $3.1, water and sewer fund is a minus $268,000, and then the solid waste is a minus $1.6 million. Depreciation and amortization for your water sewer is $874,000, and the solid waste at $455,000. You see your total fixed assets there in the water sewer fund at 31.1, accumulated depreciation at 17.5, and cash at 2.1. I do want to point this out. I think you've already kind of responded to the FPIC, if you will, which FPIC, Financial Performance Indicators of Concern. And it's basically spit out of a spreadsheet that the LGC prepares. If that total fixed assets is $31 million. If more than 50% of that second number there, accumulated depreciation, if it gets above 50%, they automatically kick that out and say, hey, do you have a plan to replace your system or parts of your system, et cetera? Y'all already have a plan, but it's an automatic kick out. It's not a negative thing. It's just, hey, do you have a plan? You have a plan. Cash and investments, you can see where general fund has $36.8 million. Cash and investments other at $69.1. Cash and investments water sewer at $2.1, and then cash and investments solid waste at $4.4 million. Again, general fund balance at $41 million. Other governmentals at $69.4. And then net position water sewer fund at 14.8 and solid waste at 2.2. Property tax rates there for all 5 years. Collection percentage at 99% this year. And then total valuation and levy amounts are the bottom 2 lines on that first page. The top of this page, you see your debt analysis. I'm going to go straight to the totals. You see it at 38.4 million. If you were to go back 5 years, you see that number at 60.3 million. If you were to look in the notes to the financial statements or on the government-wide statements, you would see a much larger number because it gets into OPEB, some of the other compensated absences, or a couple of the other accruals that are not traditionally considered debt when that you're going to end up paying off, because OPEB, other post-employment benefits, you're going to pay off over a long period of time, you're going to budget for it, et cetera. This is the debt that you actually go to the bank or go to LGC and get approval for and buy. But I do want to kind of point out that I think is something that you should be proud of, et cetera. When you look at that 60.3 going down to 38 million over that 5-year period, and then you should look at the fund balance on the previous page going from 26 million to 41 million. I mean, that's a healthy sign there. Even though your fund balance may not be quite as high as you would like, your debt is coming down at a pretty dramatic pace, which is healthy. And you see a breakdown. I'm not going to read all the department totals there, but of your general fund revenues, 115.9 million. You go back 5 years, it's 84.3. General fund expenditures, 109.5. You go back, it's 87.3. So there's also a note down there where in the future we may combine some revenue and expenditures to help get a percentage a little bit higher on our general fund percentage there on page 1, fund balance available, because we want to keep it as high as possible in case we go back to the debt committee at the LGC State Treasurer's Office. So we may combine a couple of revenue and expenditure there to help get that up a little bit. And then if you'd be kind enough to flip over to page 6. You see this chart in blue is the fund balance, and then in red is unavailable fund balance. On the bottom, you see fund balance available as a percentage. You see the group weighted average there in red, and Burke County in blue. And then on page 7, you see in the pie chart, cash and investment balances and fund balance and net position with the totals underneath that. Total cash balances being 112.6 million. Total fund balance, net position, 127.4 million. On page 8, you see tax collection percentages, group weighted average and statewide average. You see your group weighted average bump up there pretty hard. That's about the same time they changed the group weighted average, and I really can't explain how useless that made that number, but I still put it in there because they made it where it used to be grouped by 10. They made it everybody above 100 million and everybody below 100 million. So it gets real hard to have a peer group when you're being compared to Mecklenburg and Wake and some of those other ones. I don't know that it has the meaning that it once had. On the bottom, you see the pie chart there with percentages. Governmental versus business type activity debt, with most of your debt being governmental at the current moment at 97%. And then on page 9, you see revenues over and under expenses before transfers and contributions with the 4 funds there. And on the bottom, you see why we focus a lot on ad valorem taxes, because they make up 51.65% of the total revenue. And on page 10, you see general fund expenditures with education, human services, public safety, and general government being the 4 big ones there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the FPIC that you have to respond to the LGC on is simply where accumulated depreciation is greater than 50% of the total fixed assets, which I don't see as a big deal at all, especially with you having a plan. The one thing I didn't mention, there were findings. They were all related to Medicaid. They're all technical findings. There are no question costs related to any of those. So it's just, in my experience, we do 27 of the 100 counties. We don't do any county that we don't find something in that area. So just something you have to continue to monitor. A lot of transactions go there. We do a lot of work in that area. In fact, our guy who does the testing worked for 15 years in that specific area with the state of Louisiana, and he loves it. And if he doesn't find something, you've got perfect people. So overall, I'd love for you to take away this. Got an unmodified report. Finances look good. Debt's going down. Fund balance is still going up. So it's a really healthy situation. Happy to answer any questions you've got of me tonight, but anytime. Our office number is there. If you call, I'm not there, tell them to give you my cell number, and I'll get you an answer to your question. And we appreciate you allowing us to do the audit.
Right, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan on our audit tonight? Seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion to accept this report as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the report as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk. Alan, thank you for being here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I was able to contact Sandy at the college. She's still on the Tuesday night schedule and begs your forgiveness and wondered if she could come to the March pre-agenda.
I think that would be just fine. We'll hear Sandy at the March pre-agenda. Okay. Gentlemen, we've got a number of things to do. Are we okay to continue? Does anybody need a recess?
I could use 2 minutes.
Okay, we'll stand in recess for
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, we'll consider ourselves seated back in session at this time. This brings us to item number 8, informal public comments tonight. Madam Clerk, do we have any folks signed up for public comment?
Just a couple, Mr. Chairman. Lauren Van Riper. Lauren's still here? Oh.
I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to acknowledge the unprecedented challenge the storm has presented, not just to homeowners, but the county as well. A hurricane hitting the mountains was not something we expected, and I recognize the enormous hurdles the county had to navigate. However, the rebuilding process is far from over. Many property owners, myself included, are still unable to move forward because circumstances outside our control. While my focus is on the lakefront, this is not just a lake issue, it affects all residents of Burke County. The permit waiver for the storm-related repairs opened sometime after October 6th and ended December 31st. There was no clear notification, leaving many homeowners unaware that this relief was even available. For many, this was a lost opportunity that could have been eased a financial burden and expedited repairs. Despite the mandated permit fee waiver, many homeowners never even had the chance to take advantage of it simply because they were unaware it existed. Counties were required to post a refund availability for any fees collected before the law's passage, yet no webpage information or public notification regarding these refunds was found on Burke County website or social media. Without clear outreach, many homeowners never had the information needed to act within the time frame, further delaying their ability to rebuild. The reality of rebuilding in Burke County, out of 517 permits issued in the 3 months following the storm, 5 were for dock-related repairs. 3 of those were brand new construction unrelated to storm damage, leaving just 2 actual permit repairs. Hundreds of docks and structures were displaced, yet most remain untouched, not due to neglect, but due to insurance denials, limited contractors, access issues, and regulatory and financial hurdles. Dock repairs are highly specialized. There's only a handful of people on the lake that can build them. Some have wait lists exceeding 195 homeowners. I've been waiting on one for almost 4 months now. He just came out today. It's impossible to find a contractor. I called 19 installers, 9 don't work on the lake, 3 have full voicemails, you can't even leave them a message. 3 have visited, and I've only gotten 2 quotes in 4 months. The lake has been over full pond since the hurricane, requiring a balance between recovery and environmental preservation as not to cause further damage to the shorelines. Water clarity and runoff contamination remain unknown as the extent of floating debris and submerged hazards. While dock repairs not being classified as an emergency, the tragic loss of homes and livelihoods elsewhere in the county, the economic and environmental impact of the storm damage is significant. Additionally, the county has already recognized the importance of the lake through recent zoning changes, including the special overlay for lakefront properties. This designation reinforces the county's long-term investment in maintaining lakefront communities, which directly contribute to property values, tourism, and economic activity. So we have been unable to rebuild due to blocked access to properties and docks from down trees and debris, unusually high water levels due to broken floodgates owned by Duke Energy, complexity of securing multiple permits between Duke and Burke, and an influx of unverified contractors offering predatory pricing, making it difficult for us to find reliable, affordable repairs. Governor Cooper extended North Carolina's statewide emergency declaration until March 1st to facilitate ongoing recovery efforts. If the state has extended emergency members, it stands to reason that Burke County should do the same for those still struggling to rebuild. This, additionally, under the Disaster Recovery Act, local governments have the authority to extend permit deadlines and waive fees, but must take formal action to do so. By extending the permit waiver for all homeowners still in the process of recovery, the county can ensure storm-damaged properties are properly repaired efficiently without unnecessary financial hardship, support economic recovery in the region by facilitating construction efforts, and improve disaster preparedness for future events by ensuring clear communication and proactive planning. Given these challenges, I respectfully request that Burke County reopen the permit waivers for storm-related repairs so that all homeowners have a fair opportunity to rebuild, implement clear and proactive communication strategies through official channels, including the county website and social media, to ensure that residents are fully informed of available assistance, deadlines, and procedural requirements, and evaluate and streamline the permit process for future disasters, ensuring that homeowners aren't delayed by regulatory bottlenecks beyond our control. This is new territory for all of us. I fully appreciate the challenges that the county has faced managing the unprecedented situation. However, the state of emergency remains in effect until March 1st. It is clear the recovery is still ongoing. I'm just asking that we can get a chance to build back. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Van Ryder. Madam Clerk.
Christy Gupton.
Thank you, Commissioners. I rise before you tonight to revisit some items that came up on Friday at this body's strategic planning regarding opioid settlement funds. I've had a history with Burke County, having been involved in opioid town hall meetings in 2018, where I served on a committee with my fellow citizens, including members of the Burke County Health Department, the sheriff at the time, Steve Wisnant, and the attorney general at the time, now Governor Josh Stein. I brought subject matter experts from out of town to share their knowledge, and really that's what I'm here to do tonight, is just share knowledge. While I enjoyed Friday's session, I was left a little curious as to why certain important considerations were not mentioned. When Commissioner Barrier asked a simple question regarding who of our county peers has shown impressive progress that we might learn from, I think I was just as disappointed as he was that there was no answer to that question. I know there are counties and states like West Virginia, Arkansas, Colorado, and Florida who have had impressive results to share, and if I can make introductions to some of those entities, I'd be happy to. Those counties, public school systems, and private sector employers joined forces to ensure they were serving the needs of the community in both treatment and prevention goals. I felt the attention on prevention was a little lacking from, some of the panelists that we heard from on Friday. A couple of items were also conspicuously missing for me. First, no one mentioned the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, a 500-page piece of legislation that was finalized into law last year. This is an obvious way the county can partner with its business and community leaders to ensure that they can support each other in complying with the Department of Labor's mandate to provide mental health care in parity with medical care. It's an exceedingly hard thing to do, but it can be done when you work together. I've heard it said by DC insiders who track closely the Department of Labor's actions around mental health parity that the DOL has become quite impatient at the lack of knowledge about this law and its requirements. I'm sure you've heard it said that ignorance is no defense when found being non-compliant in federal law. As a community of businesses and public sector employers, it's critical for us to understand our role in complying, but even better, finding parity or even creating parity where it doesn't yet exist. At the very least, your NQTL analysis, that stands for non-quantitative treatment limits, is an annual requirement. It will provide just as much guidance to your newly formed advisory committee that was appointed on Friday as the county's public health needs assessment provides to the Public Health Advisory Board that I'm sitting on for you, and I thank you for that appointment. If employers here in Burke County have not yet engaged a subject matter expert to assist in preparing their NQTL analysis, it is way past time for them to get started. Federal law requires you to have it on hand upon request and repeat that analysis annually. I'm happy to point you in the right direction if you're hearing this for the first time, and that includes any employer in the sound of my voice. Other analytical tools, including claims analytics, to determine what extent the prescribing of opioids here in Burke County exceeds that of your peers, as well as the presence of ghost networks in employer-sponsored PPO network directories. That's when an employee goes to search for a mental health provider, and they find that a significant portion of providers listed there either do not exist, even though they're listed, or are not taking new patients. If any of these items or others need further explanation, I'm happy to talk at your convenience. Thank you for allowing me the time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. Madam Clerk.
That's all the cards I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. This brings us to item number 10, consent agenda, or rather 9, rather. I'll ask Mr. Manager to review the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll work through this fairly quickly. Each of these items are in your packet for review consideration. Item 1 is a proclamation from our Animal Services Department declaring February as Spay and Neuter Month. Item 2 is request for approval, budget amendment number 9 on the year, $329,871. This is from the State Department of Public Health, broken down in 5 different categories, but largely offsetting existing costs. Item 3 is the quarterly presentation for Q2 from Burke County Public Schools of their financial performance. Item 4, similar for our Tourism Development Authority, is the Q1, Q2 financial update that was presented at our pre-agenda meeting. Item 5, also from the Tourism Development Authority, is a resolution supporting the recovery efforts of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Item 6 is your standard monthly tax department report for collections for the month ending January 2025. And item 7 for consideration, similarly, your standard monthly release and refund report for January 2025. Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions the board may have on those items.
Any questions on the consent agenda? Seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented by our manager.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Stroud. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. It's 5-0. Item number 10 tonight brings us to Board of Commissioners resolution amending the 2025 meeting schedule. Gentlemen, we've had an opportunity to talk about this. I think I will call your attention to a revised schedule. Madam Clerk realized that she had us originally scheduled to work on Labor Day, and that wasn't going to work for us. So she's got that straightened out, I believe, and the dates. This moves our normal pre-agenda meeting from Tuesday to Monday, so that both our meetings will be on Mondays. First Monday, pre-agenda, third Monday, as we have already changed for our regular meeting. Any questions on this item? Seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt resolution 2025-06.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt resolution number 2025-06.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. That is 5-0. Item number 2 comes from our clerk tonight, appointments to the Burke County Planning Board. Madam Clerk.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a request to make some appointments to the Burke County Planning Board for seats number 1 and 2, who both represent the East. And it is a request to remove Beth Hiley's name from the roster and to thank her for her service. I'm happy to report that you have 4 candidates tonight for seat 1, and they are Chase Billow, Benjamin Ely, Sean Freeman, and Carol Lewis. The term for seat number 1 ends September 30th, 2027, and for seat 2, the term ends September 30th, 2025.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Gentlemen, I'll first entertain a motion to remove Beth Hiley's name from the Burke County Planning Board roster and thank her for her service.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. That'll be 5-0. All right, gentlemen, we have, as the clerk just announced to us, we have nominations for seat number 1. We have the 4 candidates. We've received applications. You've had an opportunity to look at those. Seat number 1 is East, represents East on the Planning Board, and it completes the remainder term ending September 30th, 2027. So I would entertain motions, or nominations rather, for that seat.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Sean Freeman for seat 1.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Burns. I have a nomination for Sean Freeman. Other nominations?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Benjamin Ely.
Nomination for Benjamin Ely. Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, I'll close nominations. Those in favor of Sean Freeman indicate by the uplifted hand. And those in favor of Benjamin Ely indicate by the uplifted hand. All right, Madam Clerk, that's 3 for Ely and 2 for Freeman, so that seat will go to Mr. Ely. That brings us to seat number 2. That leaves us with 3 nominees or applicants for seat number 2. This seat also for the East, term ending September 30, 2025. At this time, I would open nominations for seat number 2.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for Sean Freeman for seat number 2.
I have a nomination for Sean Freeman for seat number 2. Any other nominations for this seat?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Chase Billow.
A nomination for Chase Billow. Any other nominations? Seeing here none, I'll close nominations. Those in favor of Sean Freeman indicate by the uplifted hand. That'll be 3. Those in favor of Mr. Billow. That's 2. Sean Freeman then will be seated in seat number 2 for the East, Burke County Planning Board, as described. Thank you, gentlemen. This brings us to number 3, clerk appointments to the Child Protection, Child Fatality Prevention Team. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to fill a vacancy for seat number 7, at large, number 4, on the Child Protection, Child Fatality Prevention Team. We have 2 applicants tonight, Tim Barnsback or Dylan Smith, and the term is 3 years ending April 30th, 2027.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Gentlemen, you've heard the information. At this time, I'll open the nominations for this seat on the Child Protection, Child Fatality Prevention Team.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Dylan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Barrier. Any other nominations on this seat? Seeing here none, all those in favor of selecting Dylan Smith to serve on this seat, please indicate with uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 4, comes from our county manager tonight in BDI, Burke Business Park Project Management Agreement. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you're all aware, back in October of 2023, Burke Development received a $35.8 million grant that we've talked about many times for the specific purpose of economic development. When that legislation was passed, direct funding came from the General Assembly to Burke Development and was tied to a Great Meadows industrial site that is in the western part of our county. As we've talked about, certainly a transformational opportunity. Economic development is a focus area on your strategic plan, but that particular project remains unfunded, and the grant, although substantial, was broken into 2 primary components. A property acquisition component that was roughly $22 million, and a water wastewater infrastructure development component is about $13.8 million. Again, although significant, neither of those fully fund either compartment of that product development. And so in last year's General Assembly session, we asked legislators to consider giving some flexibility to the funding so that it was able to be put to use. Again, with the mindset of job creation, tax base growth, and infusion of economic energy. That was awarded as part of some legislation that was approved in December, giving flexibility to $20 million of the $22 million unrestricted funding source from 2023. That also came with a requirement to enter into a project management agreement with Burke Development between the county and would allow funding flexibility to construct shell buildings, speculative industrial shell buildings at Burke Business Park, which we all know has already pre-graded, pad-ready sites, has public utilities, and largely serves as an opportunity for some innovative economic development so that we can, again, try to have some infusion here in our economy. So the project management agreement is in your packet. It's a very simple agreement that I think does fundamentally 2 things. It prioritizes formal communication so that the county and BDI are making joint decisions as we move through the project design, development, and execution, but also formalizes a commitment to communication so that both this board and the BDI board are fully able to contribute to things like architectural design, the specifics of the building, things like ceiling height, as well as target industry recruitment. So again, that is in your packet for review. I'm happy to answer any questions, but the request here is for the board to consider that approval. And then we'll be talking more in detail about if the board does approve what this project development looks like at your work session coming up on March the 6th.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any question for Brown on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, and just a couple things, more for clarity, maybe for the folks at home. Brian, you've taken the time to go over this with us, and I appreciate that individually. But could you just remind us about the Interlocal Economic Development and Project Finance Agreement that was from 2005?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So there are a group of partners, Valdez, Drexel, the city of Morganton, and the county that in, I believe, May of 2005 entered a joint interlocal agreement referred to as the quote parties to purchase the land that is Burke Business Park. There was a substantial down payment with a contribution from each of the parties, and then also some debt that was issued to finalize the acquisition cost that's been amortized, and that debt service has been split. To Commissioner Barrier's point, BDI would represent the parties, but the quote parties who are the members of this interlocal agreement, which I believe extends for 40 years, would be represented by BDI in the agreement.
And then one other thing, or actually two other things. It says agreement term effective 10 years from the date of execution. And I know that from going through this, that we actually have 3 years to develop and build and sell, if I understood that correctly.
Yes.
But this says for 10 years, so I'm just wondering why this is 10 years.
So the only correlation to your point, Commissioner, the legislation granted a 36-month from December of 2024, so through December 2027 to design, build, construct, and sell an industrial shell building, and those proceeds have to be recouped and put back into the same operating account for Great Meadows as they originated from. The 10-year clause was simply to align with the option that BDI has on purchasing the land. It doesn't in any way change the 36-month time window for the shell building program, but it more closely aligns with the option that expires at the end of 2033, beginning of 2034.
Okay, and one other thing, on the back, section 2E.3, parenthesis D, it talks about proceeds derived from the sale or lease of any buildings. So if I vote to approve this, is that saying that I would agree that we might actually own, the local government own and then lease those shell buildings? Is that a possibility based on that?
There are models. I'm not a fan of one. I would never recommend one to this board, but there are models that in this shell building framework across the state where the counties have, typically not owned the building and leased it, but maybe sold to a private developer who did lease, and it's a kind of a public-private partnership. I'm not sure that's to our advantage. Regardless, I think what the agreement does require, and what I think you'd be voting on, is before any of those decisions would be made, it would all come back for this board for consideration. At this point, BDI is the custodian of the funds and likely would hold title to the property, to the building as it's being constructed, along with the partners that are of the interlocal agreement because they own the real property. But again, before anything was transferred, I think this agreement requires that it comes back to this board and through the manager's office to make sure that we're comfortable with it, whatever we arrange. I think that leasing is really not the best option given a variety of circumstances, but it is a legal option in North Carolina, and other places have done that.
And then the last question that I have, under the reporting section, no later than December 1st, 2024. So apparently since this was passed through legislation, we had a reporting requirement. Do we know that BDI has fulfilled that requirement for December 1st, 2024?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that money put to use. I'm just really concerned about the potential of a lease, but thank you for answering the question.
Yes, sir.
Other questions on this matter? All right, we entertain a motion at this time for this matter.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the project design and management agreement between Burke County and Burke Partnership for Economic Development Incorporated, BDI, as presented. Further, authorize the chairman to execute the agreement on behalf of our board.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. Those opposed? That's 4-1, Madam Clerk. Item number 5, community development. This is consideration to waive fees for Helene damage permits. This be presented by Alan Glines. Evening, Alan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm glad to be here tonight to bring to your attention the opportunity that we have to continue to waive fees related to Hurricane Helene. We heard some comments from Ms. Van Riper about the challenge of trying to get people out to her site to even start the process of working on her dock at her home there. We have had about over 400 permits for hurricane-related damage that we've basically issued since the beginning of after the hurricane came through. Most of those, of course, occurred in the first few months, but we still have some that come in on a regular basis. We did an informal poll with our Western North Carolina community, and I had about 9 respondents, but most of them were continuing to waive fees, and they follow that in a similar manner where their boards or town commissions and such voted to continue to waive fees. So that's what we're here for today. With your support, we would continue to waive fees. We'll keep track of those permits. Folks tell us they have an issue or something they're repairing related to Hurricane Helene. Of course, in the first few weeks, it was reconnecting power mostly. Trees had fallen on power lines and took things off their houses, so there's a lot of repairs for that. But we do still see some folks who are working through the process to get their homes repaired, and sometimes that's structural damage and other major issues, electrical permits and that sort of thing. So we're happy to continue with that at the pleasure of the board.
All right, thank you, Alan. Gentlemen, you've had this resolution in your package, and this would allow the waiver to remain in effect through December 31, 20. It says 24, but I think that should say 25.
I believe that's a typo.
Madam Clerk, you see that?
That's certainly a typo, yes, sir.
So we'll need to correct the resolution, but with that correction, gentlemen, December 31, 2025 would be the waiver date. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt resolution 2025-04.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
Alan, are there any circumstances where we have already charged someone that?
We understood right off the bat after the hurricane that it was likely that there would be a fee waiver. So we never charge fees for the whole time duration. It's only just in this January window we might have a few we have to return money back.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to make sure that if there's a few in January, I'd like for them to.
Yeah, we won't forget that. We'll go back and correct this.
Everybody clear with that? Yes, sir. All right. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, just to point out that 2024 date in that upper whereas is supposed to be 2024. It's 2025 in the bottom part of it. So we're good.
Okay. As long as we got our dates square, we're good. I see it. Thank you very much. All right. Brings us to item number 6 from the Fire Marshal's Office, Hazard Mitigation Plan. This will be presented tonight by Robert Bishop. Good evening, Robert.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So we have the Unifor Hazard Mitigation Plan. This plan is reviewed, updated every 5 years. It's shared between Alexander, Burke, Catawba, and Caldwell counties. Includes up to 28 municipalities. 7 of those are from Burke. So we're just looking to adopt a resolution for it.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Gentlemen, any questions on this resolution for hazard mitigation plan? Seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt resolution 2025-04. Oh, sorry, 05, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk. All right, this brings us to item number 11, reports and comments from the board. And at this time, I'll start way down there with our attorney, Mr. Hall. Any questions, comments from you tonight, sir?
Nothing from me. Enjoyed being with you again, even for a long one.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
No comments for me tonight, thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Stroud?
Nothing from me.
Mr. Burns?
I just would like to express our appreciation for Congressman Tim Millard spending the day in our county today.
Yeah.
We all had an opportunity to get together and meet with him for lunch. I understand that he met with some business folks with our chamber this morning early and then stopped by the NCSSM for a visit. Did want to publicly express our appreciation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vice Chair?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Berry?
I'd just like to apologize to Commissioner Burns for stepping on you just a minute ago. Sorry about that. That's it.
Right. I too appreciate Congressman Moore coming to town today. I would just let folks know he does plan to open 5 or 6 district offices throughout his district, one of which will be here in Morganton a little bit later in February, March timeframe. He was opening an office in Rutherford tonight, I believe, or this afternoon. So our folks will have the opportunity to be able to see his staff or him as potential arises over his term serving us in Washington. With that, I will make several courtesy reminders. March the 3rd, our BOC pre-agenda meeting at 3 p.m. Is that the new date, Madam Clerk? Is that the correct date?
That is the new date.
All right, thank you, ma'am. March the 6th and 7th, our Board of Commissioner Budget Retreat will be at the North Carolina School of Math and Science barn. It'll begin at 8 a.m. And just as a reminder, if you, this is a public meeting, and we would be glad for public to come, but the NCSSM does require an RSVP for security purposes on their campus. So if you plan to come and join us, we'd love to have you, but please RSVP. You can do that to the clerk via email so that she can provide the NCSSM the information they need for security purposes. Youth groups interested in leading our Pledge of Allegiance at our Board of Commission meetings, we'd love to have you sign up. You can do that via the form on the county's website. We would encourage groups to do that. Continue to spay and neuter your pets, foster, adopt a pet through our animal services group. As always, please watch out for your trash going to our convenience centers. Don't litter, and help us keep Burke County clean and green. Madam Clerk, I'll recognize you at this time for vacancy announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. We have the following opportunities for citizens to be involved in county boards and committees: the Adult Care and Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, Burke County Public Health Advisory Board, Hickory Regional Planning Commission, Drexel Planning Board, ETJ alternate, Burke County Planning Board, and Partners Health Management's Human Rights Committee. And we did fill that ETJ seat for the City of Morganton last month.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. As you can see, a number of vacancies there on boards and commissions throughout our county. I would encourage those of you that may have interest and time to help us with those, please consider an application. You can find that online or with our clerk at any time. I'm pleased to tell you tonight that we do not have a need for a closed session, and I know that's a disappointment to you guys. And with that, that brings us to item 14, adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we adjourn.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Appreciate your attendance.